All right. Good morning. I am excited to be here today with a guy that I don't get to see as much as I would like to these days.
Yeah.
We're here with stalwart grad and awesome instructor, Mr. Brian Truong. So say hi to the folks.
Hey everybody. My name's Brian, and I gotta agree, Logan. We don't get to see each other as often as we used to, and that's a big miss in my books. Your presence has always been very rewarding, and we learn a lot from each other. Thank you for having me on and giving me this opportunity.
Totally. Well, I think if I remember correctly that this is episode 10. So I wanted to do something a little bit new to kick things off. Probably stealing from a million other podcasts out there, but we're going to kick off the conversation today with sort of a magic minute. I'm not going to time it, so it's probably not going to be a minute, but I'm going to ask a bunch of fun rapid fire questions just for maybe people to get to know you a little bit. And then we'll get into the real stuff after that. So are you ready?
All right. Let's do this.
All right, here we go. What is your favorite color?
Blue.
What was the coolest pair of shoes you ever bought?
What is it? Nike Pegasus Zooms, but I didn't buy them. I got them as a gift.
Even better. There we go. What is your favorite kind of ice cream?
Anything with hazelnut in it.
Okay, excellent. And where's the coolest place you've ever traveled to?
Definitely Japan.
Nice. If you could have dinner with anybody, living or dead, who would you pick?
Ooh, that's a tough one. You know what? I think would be really funny. I would absolutely love to have dinner with Dwayne Johnson.
The Rock.
Yeah,
Nice.
I think he would be really funny to have dinner with.
You might not be able to see him from behind the pile of food he was eating, but yeah, that'd be a pretty epic conversation. I like it. Okay, what sports did you play, or what physical activities were you into as a kid?
Played soccer a lot in elementary school, but never in any actual capacity on a team or anything like that, just for fun, recess and lunch. Other than that, I've actually never played any sports in my life beyond that. The gym was the only closest thing to a sport that I ever did, and I didn't start that till I was about 15.
Cool. All right. And we'll go with one more. Not like a science book. It's got to be a fun thing. So book, movie, TV show, something like that. What's your favorite mental guilty pleasure in terms of entertaining yourself?
Ooh. You know what? There's this book always comes to mind because it was just something that's really funny, but it also connected with my work with children with ASD, or autism spectrum disorder. It was called 200 Hours of Edward. And it gives the perspective of life through a person who has high functioning Asperger's. And it was something that really highlighted to me like the things that I saw in my students, and it was just a different outlook but it was also very funny. And I really enjoyed that book. I actually recommend it to a lot of people.
Cool. I like it. Excellent. That's always such a loaded question, because as soon as I say guilty pleasure, man, I always get a little bit worried that we're going to get into like a non-PG area, but that's okay. You did well. Kept it strong. Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, I'm really happy that you were able to set aside some time and jump on the web chat with me. There are so many things that we could talk about. I see you as a consummate expert in an awful lot of stuff. You've got a ton of experience between training clients and teaching different modalities and being an instructor. So, there's kind of a gold mine here. But I think when I think about you, one of the things that I think really rises to the top is, paralleled in some of the other work you do. For those of you guys who don't know, Brian also has his master's degree in clinical counseling. And there's a really interesting intersection between that and, teaching people how to squat and deadlift and Olympic jerk and stuff like that. So what I wanted the theme for today to be is, how do you support clients beyond the session? So communication, accountability, lifestyle management, stuff like that. It's interesting when you look at the job, when you look at sort of the traditional way that personal training has been set up. It's like, okay, we did a session together. I like you. I think you can help me. I'm going to buy 12 sessions. And so it kind of looks like the person's buying 12 hours of your time. There's a little bit of there's potentially kind of a slight misunderstanding that that's what they're getting. And I think there's even trainers that operate that way. Like, oh, you show up, it's 9 a.m. on Monday, you are the person I pay attention to for the next hour, and then I will not really think about you again until 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning. Absolutely. But that's also not the way it works at all. I even have said to clients as I'm helping them get started, you know, you're not buying 12 sessions with me. You're getting 168 hours a week of support for the length of time that you choose to work with me. Mm-hmm. However long it takes us to get through, you know, these 12 sessions and beyond. So that's, I think, what can be hard to navigate as a trainer. You go from client to client to client to client, and you're carrying a certain amount of programming and whatever type load. But then they only see you a couple hours a week, and how do they get additional support or additional influence from you beyond the session? So you're someone that I've seen do an incredible job of that. You talk about it almost as an afterthought, like it's so ingrained in how you do what you do that it doesn't even seem like you have to work hard to do it. So I thought you might be able to share some insight on, you know, sort of the how and the why, and then maybe give us some ideas around the things that you do. Yeah. So kick it off. What do you got?
So, you know, I think a lot about, you know, like, you know, you said something really important there, which is that we only see our clients sometimes anywhere between 1 and 3 hours a week in terms of a dedicated session. And so I spend a lot of my time actually thinking about why they can or can't do things. So, you know, if it was really just down to having a great program or just being a really great trainer, then, you know, no matter how many times they see us, they should automatically get results. But one of the key things that I often hear trainers talk about as a difficulty is my clients won't do what I ask, or they're not doing what I want them to. And, or they can become frustrated by that. And I always ask them, well, why aren't they following through? So a lot of the times I view my relationship with my clients through that lens of my counseling and my psychology background, thinking, what are the obstacles that they are coming up against that makes it challenging for them to follow through? I don't focus as much time on the training side of things in the context of if you have the best program or you are the best trainer, none of that will really matter if I can't understand why my client can't follow through, or if I can't get my client to do it. So I think about those obstacles. You know, most of my clients tended to be, you know, moms who are taking care of their kids, or they have to do different things. Sometimes they're working, sometimes they're not. So their schedules can become quite busy. So I like to look at that as like, how do I make it easier for them to do what I want? And also I like to think about, you know, what will make it easier. So for some people, having an outline program makes sense, you know. But the thing is, when you give them the program, it's almost like you telling them, you know, here's a recipe and I just want you to do it. But you haven't really explained, you know, how to find the best ingredients, or what are the steps that need to be done individually along the way. So it's in that regard that I like to, you know, figure out what those obstacles are as we get to know each other, and then I try to make it easier. If something is not working, then we want to identify, you know, why it's not working. And I always just ask why. And whatever it is, the reason, there's always another why. You know, clients often will have difficulty managing their nutrition. They may go to a party on the weekend, or they may do something and they come back and they feel guilty because they ate too much of this or too much of that. And, you know, I might ask, well, you know, why is it that we ate too much of that? It's like, oh, well, and they always tend to get too focused on the emotional side of things. And they kind of try to make it almost come up with rationalizations for why they did it. But sometimes it's just a matter of, well, they didn't meal prep any food, or they went to the party that was, and they were hungry. Or maybe they didn't have the I guess a way of thinking about it where they could make better choices. So they eat, you know, several pieces of cake as opposed to just one. Those kinds of things are a lot of what I think about. And then when it comes down to like the communication part, each client requires a different amount of communication. Some clients, you know, they absolutely need their trainers to be their support every day. You know, just sending them a quick little message like, hey, you know, I hope you're having a good day. You know, let's remind ourselves to do these 3 things. Other times they may need less of that. A lot of the clients are, if there's too much going on, it can be very paralyzing. I often will describe this as, you actually, earlier you asked me about my favorite ice cream. I threw out anything with hazelnut because it's hard to make a choice when you have too many things going on. So you walk into a store and there's like 100 flavors of ice cream. You try about 20 of them and you're sitting there and you're like, which one do I really like? So I look at it as like, people are coming in to get support from us and they're just overwhelmed with us trying to change so many aspects of their life that they're not used to yet. And so I actually work from the standpoint of gradually introducing them to change. Much like our programming in training is an aspect of progressive overload, I want to begin to systematically introduce them to small changes. So for example, even when I help a client to choose a goal that is meaningful to them, I often will ask them for 3 different goals. And it seems like, well, wait a minute, you just said if you overwhelm them, they become paralyzed. But the thing is, I help them to choose goals that are not just meaningful in one domain, but also that they all support each other. So most people have body composition goals when they come to see me. They want to gain muscle mass, lose body fat, they want to tone in firm, etc. But then I also ask them, what's important for them to gain out of like a gym goal or a skill goal or a talent goal. So yes, maybe they want to lose 10 pounds of body fat, but they would also like to be able to do, 5 or 10 strict push-ups. And then I may also ask them, what is a behavioral goal that can also be worked upon? If they are challenged by eating breakfast every morning or having having a pre-workout shake of some kind, we will factor that in. So 3 out of 5 days a week, do you feel like you could eat breakfast? And a lot of people are like, well, yeah, of course I can eat 3 out of 5 days. But that's the point. The goal needs to be simple enough that they can achieve it. If they can't achieve it, then there's a lot of psychology aspects that kind of factor in. If the individual is very emotional, they may be very hard on themselves for failing at not following through with 3 out of 5 days of eating breakfast because it's supposed to be so easy. And so a lot of that creates a lot of challenges for them. And so, maybe the next time they don't actually tell you that they didn't eat 3 out of 5 days. And they just say, oh yeah, I totally ate 3 out of 5 days. Or they tend to eat more or less and they feel guilty for telling you or not telling you. And I try to make my clients feel completely comfortable, understanding that I'm not there to judge them. It doesn't matter if they ate the whole cake, 2 cakes, or 1 slice. What matters for us to understand is what were some of the antecedent factors that occurred that kind of led them to that behavior. And so that's a big way of kind of like approaching it from that standpoint.
So you've said a ton of really great things, and I want to kind of unpack a few of them because, again, it's like this is so your world that I think you sort of really naturally roll into stuff, and we've covered a lot. So one of the things that stood out to me as you were talking there is you're talking about, I want to find ways to make the changes that I'm helping my clients make as easy as possible. Mm-hmm. And I think in the chat that I did with Lindy, she kind of hit on the same thing, and I don't think I stopped her enough to unpack it. So this is kind of like round 2 at the same topic. So when we first meet a client, like chances are it's either the first time we've ever met them or we've only had very surface contact with them previously. Yeah. We might know their name. We might see them in the gym. We might be like, oh yeah, I think that's that person that goes to spin class every Tuesday. But typically when we sit down and do like the interview, the goal assessment, the PDQ, whatever it is, that's our first real opportunity to learn more. And those interviews tend to be somewhat formulaic, and that's okay. We've got to sort of have a standardized intake. We've got to make sure that we're covering sort of this baseline amount of information. But that's not really what you're talking about when you say, I want to know what's going to make it easiest. I want to know what their roadblocks are. So let's say that you do that initial interview, you have that initial fairly formulaic experience with somebody. It's a good enough experience for them that they sign on and they want to work with you. What does it look like to actually get to know more about them when, like you said, you're only seeing them from sort of 1 to 3 hours? What would you say? What would you say is maybe the technique and or the timeline that it takes to get to know those extra elements about them that you need to know?
Yeah, so it can be quite person specific or person dependent, just like a lot of what we do. Some clients may be more comfortable telling you more about their lives and what they do, and even about their personal lives. Whereas other clients are less inclined to open up about those things. You ask them how their day went, and they say good. Well, I like to, as you get to know them a little bit more, it's also about asking how they are as people, I guess. It's like, so when I ask them, how was your weekend? I'm just trying to get an idea of how they like to spend their weekends. And then as I understand those questions, or sorry, the answers that they give me, I begin to ask more follow-up questions. And if we're looking at formula kind of type thing, it's asking those open-ended questions, but getting to know them a little bit in that case. So, I'll take an example of many of my clients that are they their husbands tend to work in China, and they're here, and they will take care of their kids, and they are doing the daily things. One of my clients, she also has to work at night because her business is in China. So most of the day she's like preparing food for her kids. She's got to take them to all their various activities. Then she's got to go pick them up. Then she's got to make more food for them, and the kind of day goes on. When they go to sleep at night, she has to work at night. And so as I start to understand these things, one of the first things I started to think about was, at what point of the day does this client have time for herself? I'm asking her to, yes, come to the gym once or twice a week with me, but how does that translate into its effect on the rest of her life? Because I think about it as, I'm trying to work myself out of a job. And that sounds kind of silly to think about it that way, but I want to be secure in knowing that when they leave and they're doing their day-to-day things, can they do the things that I've asked, and do they know how to do that? So when I ask them the questions about how their day went, I ask them, out of all that stuff that you just told me, the story of your day, did you have an opportunity to eat today? Well, no, I didn't, because I was too rushed. And so that starts to tell me that, this person is taking care of so many other people and doing other things for other people, that the priority for taking care of themselves is a little bit lower in the list. So I try to make it easier for them to get the meals in that I need them to in order to achieve the results they want, by suggesting or looking at some of the things that they might already eat, some ways that we can get some, food in them. So for example, how do you feel about having a protein shake in between picking up your kids and taking them to their next activity? Well, I think I can do that. And so, we make it easier. I'd like to think of, okay, so if I want them to have a protein shake, how do I make that easier? And a lot of times people don't even think about it. It's like, oh, I didn't have my protein shake with me. Okay, so can we leave 1 or 2 shaker cups of some protein that's, powdered form in your car? So if you ever need to, or you forget to bring one, you have one available. Can we have, like a protein bar or granola bar, something like that in your purse, that you can have readily available in the event that you need to eat? So I kind of really start to identify like the small things that they may not pay as much attention to, or may not provide put as much priority on. And then we try to look at how to make it easier in that way.
Awesome. I love it. And it's sort of like, I guess sometimes as I've been in the industry for so long, I've both done a lot of work, but I've also watched a lot of people work. Mm-hmm. And I think I didn't really know. There's obvious things. If you see a trainer showing somebody or allowing someone to perform exercise with really bad form, that's kind of an obvious, like, oops, that's not right. But there were always little things that kind of stuck out to me as a little bit strange. I don't think I knew why. And one of those things was, if I happen to see in a session or observe in a session that the trainer is talking about themselves a lot, I was always just kind of like, because there's something to be said about having the ability to communicate 2 ways. I'm going to share a little bit about myself. That makes you trust me because I'm being a little bit vulnerable. So like, I'm not saying never talk about yourself, but if we're trying to both take them through exercise, find out things about their lives so that we can help them navigate it, if we're trying to, use some of the session time to influence the time they spend beyond being with us, then the seconds, the minutes, the conversation in between sets, all those little minutes accumulate and mean that we either get a bunch of information that we can use to help them, or it's like we don't know how to write, it's like we don't know how to ask the right questions. We don't know how to dig in. And so I think it's really common. I don't want to say immature, but I don't quite have a word other than that. It's like when you don't quite know what to do, you start to feel a little bit self-conscious. And then the fact that you're self-conscious makes you a little bit self-centered. And so then what comes out of your mouth is like, well, what I did this weekend is. Whereas if we started off with the purposeful intention of making the session as much about the client as possible, I think it lends itself a little bit better to asking questions, being curious, asking more questions, suggesting something. Do you think that would work for you? What might work better? Like, it just naturally lends itself to making the client the real center of what's happening. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, and you know, you make a good point. It's like it's hard to sometimes balance obviously training the client with getting to know them, because you know, you're always going to have some of those clients that would prefer to talk more rather than exercise. And sometimes we get caught up in the getting to know our clients that becomes too much like a conversation between people as opposed to client-trainer relationships. So, you know, this can be different for every trainer. Some trainers can spend a little bit of time during a check-in, and that's where they can really get a lot of that connection with them. Other times, as you become better, you can squeeze it in between the sets. And so I think it's a big part of it as understanding what feels more comfortable for you, but always as you begin to talk to the clients and get to know them more, it's not, like you said, it's not necessarily a bad thing for us as a trainer to tell the clients a little bit about ourselves, because it is that reciprocation of exchange of information, but also that a little bit of that personal touch that helps them to feel more connected to us as well. It doesn't mean that we sit there and tell them about all the little things that we did, but it is important for them to feel like they also understand us as a person, because the more that we are seen as a person, the more that they can start to understand some of the intentions and motives behind why we ask these personal questions. You know, if somebody kept asking me questions the whole time and never told me anything about them, then it may feel like a one-sided relationship with some of these clients. And you know, I often will hear people say, you know, my trainer is like my therapist almost. And a big part of that is not because the trainer is, you know, being an actual counselor or anything like that, but it just happens that the relationship is one that they have trust in, or that they feel close enough that they can share these things. But more importantly, we're a type of social support, whether it's about fitness advice, whether it's about nutritional advice. I've had clients ask me all kinds of questions about their marriages and their children. And a lot of times I don't know, because I don't know your life. I only know the snippet of which you're telling me. So, you know, I focus those moments on the same way I do as my work as a counselor, which is trying to understand why they're asking these questions. You know, they're obviously, maybe they just need a little bit of support in that way. And like, hey, you know what? That sounds like a really hard situation to be in. I wouldn't know what to do in that case, because I'm not you and I'm not married to this person, or I don't have kids. But at the same time, I can still reach out and say, wow, that can be really tough to manage all of that stuff and do all the 15 million things that I'm asking you to change relative to your fitness and your nutrition. So I do think it's important for us to be people. You know, because a lot of times those clients are becoming our clients because of some sort of connection they feel to us. Not always, but sometimes a lot of those clients feel connected to us as people. And it is that aspect of our relationship that creates longevity, and why some clients will continue training with trainers for like 3, 4, 5, X amount of years, even though technically we have probably exhausted the vast majority of knowledge that we've had into teaching them, but they're still getting a value out of it. And I think that's a big part of it. Trainers, you know, information, fitness, knowledge is everywhere. There's so much of it out there. You know, you can just Google it. You can find a program. You can honestly find all of this stuff for free. But it's that personal relationship between us that actually gets them to come back every time. And it's like, if they didn't get something of value, then this is where oftentimes, you know, when that conversation comes at the time for renewal, they say, you know what, thank you. Like, you helped me to get what I wanted or what I needed, and I'm okay on doing it on my own. And other times they might say, you know what, I'd really love to continue working with you because you're providing more value than just the fitness side of things.
Yeah. I think what it makes me think of when you say that too is I think especially when you're a younger trainer, when you're a younger anything, if you're in any career, you spend a lot of time and effort learning stuff so that you can do this job, right? You take a course, you go to school, you study, you practice, and you have all of this energy around gaining information. And then when it's like you get the job, you get the name tag, you get the shirt, what you want to do is send that information that you've acquired out to this person who's now hired you, working with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like when we say telling is not selling. It's like when they come in and we see how messed up their squat is, we don't really recommend sitting down with them and saying, here's everything that's wrong with your squat. Like, look how smart I am. Here's all the errors I observed. Instead, what we do is we say that knowledge is for you. Now create an experience for this person that's going to help them understand, but also see a solution. Mm-hmm. So like if we see a shift to the left, like I'm like, ooh, I'm going to have them try a side plank. And then they do their right side and it's cool. And they do their left side. And they're like, oh my God, it's way harder. Mm-hmm. I knew that was going to happen. I did it on purpose. That's because of the knowledge that I have. But I didn't go, hey, your hip shift to the left, so your left side's going to be weaker. Yeah. I gave them the experience. And that's something that has a lot of value. I'm letting you sell yourself because I'm giving you an experience. But we get used to knowing things, people asking us questions, and we're supposed to have the answers. But what's different when you talk about the relational side of the trainer-client relationship is they might say, like, my kids are driving me crazy. Oh my God, what do I do? And if it was myself, I'd be thinking like, I am not the expert in this. I don't know. And yet, because of the nature of the relationship, I might feel like I have to have an answer. Yeah. And yet maybe at that moment, the best thing to do would be to say, you know, hey, that sounds like a really tough, you know, situation to be stuck in. What do you think the solution is? Mm-hmm. And giving them space to learn that they have the answers to some things. And it's counterintuitive to what our job is. We're supposed to know, but that's where I think we get a little bit more of this kind of the soft skill side of the training relationship. So then we become someone that can help them figure stuff out just because we're holding space, right? Often the things we tell them to do, that's not quite the same. They don't have the same level of action as something they decide to do. And I think sometimes that's what we have to be able to do is give them the opportunity to choose something so that then they're motivated to go and do the thing they decided to do.
Mm-hmm. I think you tapped on that like really well in the sense of like, there is this accountability aspect to that, right? But it's also the empowerment of helping them to understand that, you know, a lot of their choices can only be made by them. When you were describing like, oh, like we see a hip shift and we make them do a side plank and then we do the other one. You know, a lot of times I've noticed, especially like newer trainers, they want to, like you said, they just want to tell them what's wrong to kind of create the value. Like, oh, I know these things. But at the same time, you know, even when I'm cueing something and I know that it's not what I want it to be, I don't just tell my client right after what if it's wrong or right or whatever. I just ask them, hey, what did you notice about that side plank? And they might say, I don't know, I'm not sure. It's like, okay, well, let's try it again. And this time I just want you to focus a little bit on how it feels like in this hip area. And they're going to be like, okay. And then, you know what, do it on the other side and say, so what do you notice between the two? And they might say, you know, the hip area felt like it was harder on this side or that side. And then it's at that point that I kind of give them the what, the why, and the how. Because I want them to understand, you know, what it is that we're doing, why we're doing it, and then how to either fix it or change it, or what's kind of occurring. Because ultimately when they leave and they have to do this programming or this program on their own, I want to feel good that they are capable of doing it without me. And that's what I meant earlier about this idea of working myself out of a job. I want them to know why they're doing the things that they're doing, as opposed to them just asking me a question and me telling it to them. If you think about a lot of times when you tell anybody a problem, like outside the fitness industry, anything, you tell somebody about your problem or you tell them about a situation, most people's first reaction is to give you advice. But the thing is, when has any problem ever been fixed by getting advice? The likelihood is very few situations are solved by getting it. It's not like you haven't thought of those things already. You know, it's more along the, they're not telling you about these things sometimes because they want more advice. A lot of times they want to tell you because they don't know who else to tell, or they want to tell you because, you know, they just want a little bit of social support. They just want to vent or rant or those kinds of things. And I think being there with them for that experience is where a lot of, I see my own value, as opposed to telling them what to do. Because it doesn't matter what I tell them to do. They could do it. But the thing is, if it doesn't work, guess what they do when they come back? Hey, so I did what you asked me to and it didn't work. What do I do now? And so it takes away their ability to empower themselves and actually be more accountable to their own decisions and their own actions. And I think that's a missing component for some individuals as trainers. And it's just something that it's hard to give like concrete ways of improving that, because a part of that is understanding the relational aspect between the client and the trainer.
Awesome. So we've talked about a lot, and you know, you and I could have these types of conversations ad nauseum and ongoing. But what I've been trying to do in sort of the conversation that I'm having with people is kind of try to find some bullet points to maybe help simplify or help people identify what we're talking about. So I want your help in creating that. I'm going to sort of feedback some of the things that I've heard you say, and we'll see if we can kind of come up with maybe a little bit of an order to evolving the relationship we have with our client. So I definitely heard you talk about ask questions, and not necessarily the formulaic ones, but leading from a sense of curiosity, trying to learn about our clients' lives, trying to learn about their roadblocks, their obstacles, their opportunities. So there's got to be an element of curiosity, I think. And then at the same time, as you're asking them these questions, you're also giving them the opportunity to become aware. You're asking questions in a certain way. You're digging in a little bit deeper. You're saying, well, why do you think that is? Well, why do you think that is? So curiosity and co-awareness, yours and theirs, kind of becomes part of the process. And then you sort of said, I think a lot about, you know, what's hard, and I think about ways to make it easier. So let's say you've asked your questions, you've learned some things, you've gone away, you've thought about it. Do you offer suggestions? Do you give them things to pick from? Like, what's the next step when it comes to wanting to help them take action on something new? How would you say you do that?
Yeah, so I think what I often will do is I want to try and identify what they tried already, or what if some of the things that they have thought about, and then it's from there that I would often offer. I like to offer forced choice. Forced choice is giving them, you know, would you rather do this or would you rather do that? You know, if it comes down to like the breakfast situation, you know, a lot of times when I think about why people don't eat breakfast, first thing I might find out is, you know, do you feel like you don't have enough time in the morning, or is it because you don't have a lot of options with what you know how to make? And if it's not enough time, then would you feel more comfortable preparing, you know, some breakfast food the night before, or would you be okay with making it in the morning? A lot of times people don't have time in the morning, or they prefer to sleep in longer. So once they've chosen that, I might say, hey, so, you know, let's think of some things that you'd be okay with making or eating in the morning, and then, you know, going from there. So would you rather eat oatmeal, or would you rather have overnight oats? And depending on which one they choose, that we can start to come up with the strategies that help them to achieve those things. So really getting into helping them to make the choices themselves, so that they're more a part of the choice. And then they're more accountable, or they're more aware of why they don't follow through, or why they may follow through.
Awesome. And one of the things that I've found, I think I sort of employ a similar strategy. One of the things I find myself saying in class when we're teaching the students is you've got to be curious, you've got to become aware of stuff, you've got to be able to offer suggestions, because oftentimes the whole point that people are struggling is that they don't know what to do. They don't have these strategies that are going to work. So you've got to be able to suggest some things, but then ultimately the choosing and the picking is up to them.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I would say around that is you've got to have suggestions, but you also have to be able to run, they might even suggest something. You have to be able to run it through the filter of, like, does that make sense? From the perspective of, like, is it good science, right? Like, oh, I want to lose weight, I'm going to follow the grapefruit diet. Is that good science? Not particularly. But then also, I look at it, especially for myself, I have all these, for me in relation to exercise, I cannot help but compare how I work out to what I was doing when I was a pro athlete. Like, in my mind, what I was doing as a pro athlete is the gold standard of what exercise and fitness and strength training should look like. I have no reason to train like that anymore. It probably isn't even a good idea. I'm older than I was. My goals are different than they were. But I can't help but think that that's the way to do it. So if I wanted to get, super in shape, my choice might be, well, I'm going to go back to training like I did when I was a pro athlete. That is good science, but it doesn't make sense. So running it through the filter is like being able to go, well, based on what you've told me, based on what I understand about you, like, I don't know, Logan, it doesn't really make sense to be training 2 hours twice a day based on your job and your work and your goals and your recovery strategy and your injuries and this, that, whatever. So having suggestions, being able to elicit suggestions, but then ultimately being able to just kind of be a filter, because if we get behind a strategy that, I don't know, it's not that it will fail, but it's less likely to succeed, then we're missing out on the opportunity to support our clients around adjusting their attitudes, beliefs, values, strategies, choices, whatever, right? And so having built a trusting relationship is maybe where we can unpack some of that stuff and say, well, what do you, if you were going to do that strategy, what do you think about this scenario? Or what do you think would happen based on this choice? Is that, the best way to go? Or could we look at adjusting it a little bit?
Yeah.
And we've earned the right to do that based on being curious and gaining awareness and working with them beyond just squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, press, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. So if we were going to bullet point this, then we want to lead with curiosity. We want to gain awareness, at the same time helping the client become aware of what they're telling us. We want to be able to either elicit or make some suggestions, and we want to run it through the filter around, does it make sense? Is it going to be something that's easy to do? Is it an easy enough change? Is it a sustainable enough change that we want to put our efforts behind it? I think that's an awesome little way to approach kind of the coaching side of things. So then, if we were gonna just address what you said around, you're trying to work yourself out of a job, but often, even though people reach their goal, they want to stay with you. What do you do then to evolve how you are working with someone? How do you take them from a weight loss goal to the next thing if they want to keep working with you? We don't want to just be a rent-a-friend. We want to be giving them some value. We want to help them on the movement science side of things regardless. What are some of the things that you do to progress your clients?
So earlier I had mentioned that I often will get my clients to think about 3 different goals. And this is where those other goals begin to factor in. So once we've hit their body composition goal, then this is where we can begin to highlight what their gym or talent goal was. A lot of people don't really care about hitting certain amounts of weight in an exercise. Some people do, some people don't. So, if that's why when I get them to think about their gym or talent goals, such as like 5 pull-ups or whatever, I'm also trying to understand why that's important to them. Maybe they've never been able to do a pull-up before. They've tried a lot of times over the years to get there. And so they've always kind of come up to a wall and failed. But once you get them to that first goal of hitting that pull-up, it kind of opens up like, wow, I did it. And so I start to get them to think about, well, what's next for you? And so it's like, hey, this is great. You got your first pull-up and this is amazing. So, beyond just going to working to 2 pull-ups or 3 pull-ups or 5 pull-ups, we can already do that as a part of our program. What's another skill that you've always wanted to learn or work on? From there, the behavioral goals often are generally within the personal domain, and that's usually where a lot of habit development occurs. So once we start doing those, we start to focus on other things. If I know that, they've been taking care of their kids most of the time, they're so busy they have very little time for themselves, I may focus on the things that they've told me throughout our sessions about, that they didn't have enough time to do anymore, or that they used to do these things. Like, for example, when they were an athlete, they used to do these things, but they would like to do some more of those. It's like, how can we focus on that next? Let's think about how to carve out some time for you. A big thing that I do with my clients is I get them to think about the session, not just as a training session, but it's one dedicated hour that they have for themselves. A lot of times our clients don't have a lot of time for themselves. They go to work, they have to do their work. When they go home, they have families, they have other things they need to do. So at what point are they giving themselves the time priority? So I get them to focus on that. If the gym becomes their 1 hour of the day, can we carve out another, X amount of time outside of session that allows them to do the things that they want, things that are meaningful and valuable to them, that are outside of the fitness domain? Because those things that they're working upon are the same skills that they would technically use to achieve their fitness goal. And so it really starts to develop their habits, and their personal growth. And it's something that I think is very important to the longevity of not just the relationship of things that they want to learn, but also their development as a person.
Nice. I like it. Yeah. At a certain point, if we're super stressed out and we're, trying to accomplish a goal, it just ends up feeling like a lot more load and a lot more work. And if we don't find ways to help our clients or at least support them in unloading, then at a certain point, fitness just becomes this heavy thing that they need to put down and take a break. We want to find a way to give them other ways to unload, and then have maybe fitness feel like something that is refueling them instead of taking up more of their energy. Awesome. Brian, I love it. This has been a really awesome conversation, and I think there's some real gems in here for people sort of looking to, grow and mature as a trainer and a coach. So really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. I think there's definitely room for some follow-up here. We could dive into some other concepts, which is really awesome. So thank you to you, sir. And I know you've been able to kind of set up a little bit of an at-home space to do some things, and you're always productive and always working on stuff, which is inspiring. But at the same time, constantly speaking that message of like, it's okay to take some time off. It's okay to be struggling with things a little bit because of the change. So I think that kind of voice is one of the things that I respect and admire about you the most, is being able to create that space while also accomplishing some really incredible things. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you for sharing. It's a Saturday of all things, so I hope you've got some fun stuff planned for today. And I'm gonna put a little book link in the video notes, and if you guys haven't found him yet, I'll show you where to find him on Instagram and stuff like that. He's a good guy to follow, and a great set of a great set of knowledge, and a lot of willingness to help, which I think is one of the reasons why you've been able to help as many people as you have. So thank you, dude. Appreciate it. Maybe we'll do another one of these and dive into a few more topics. So if you guys want to hear about anything in particular, feel free to put a comment in the video, stuff that you want to ask this smart guy, and we'll see if we can get back and do a second one in the future.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, Brian. Thanks so much, man. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.